Gran Turismo 7's update 1.63 is here, which of course means brand new events added to the game, and we're kicking things off with this update as the Sunday Cup at Sardinia. After that we head over to Suzuka Circuit, this time for the Japanese FR Challenge 450. We then head over to the United States of America at Watkins Glen on the long course layout, of course this time around for Race of Turbo Sportscars featuring the Hyundai Elantra N. After that, for the fourth event of this update, it's time to head over to Germany and the Nürburgring GP, this time for the Vision Gran Turismo Trophy, of course featuring the new Opel Corsa VGT. We then finish up the new events from this update with a very surprisingly good one, with the WTC 700 returning, this time at Alsace Village. However, before we do get into this video, I'm trying to get this channel to 70,000 subscribers. So if you want to stay up to date with everything GT7 and motorsport gaming related, if you could kindly leave a like, subscribe and comment, it would be massively appreciated and really help the channel out. Anyway, let's get to it then. Kicking things off, of course, as always with pretty much every single update these days, is the Sunday Cup. This time it takes place at Sardinia Road Track. Well, what about the finer details for this one then? It's a 2-lap sprint featuring a total of 10 cars. Your car type must be a road car. As for the rewards, very low, 20k for first place, 12k for second, and third is going to be 8k. Now your main rival cars for this one, of course, are made up with some of the slowest cars that are currently available in GT7. As for car restrictions, BOP is set to off for this one, with car use being a garage car. Car settings are absolutely allowed, there's no damage, and both penalties are set to off, so you don't have to worry about those. So let's get into it then, of course featuring one of the new cars from the update and the main car that this is kind of featured for the Sunday Cup. That is of course the Toyota RAV4 Adventure from 2020, and I do have to say here, this is a tricky little event. It's on an incredibly short track layout and only lasting 2 laps, meaning that it will take you a total of about 2 minutes to complete. And if you're like me and you stay within any PP recommendation and run the game on the hardest difficulty, you'll probably notice that the lead car is incredibly far up the road. Now usually when we get a new Sunday Cup event and such like that, of course featuring one of these slower new vehicles to the game, I don't usually have issue with just grabbing that vehicle and going ahead and winning it first time. This time around it was definitely a case that the car is going to be massively off of the pace due to the short track layout and the huge gap from the leader, so you're more than likely going to have to upgrade a little bit. Again, I just kind of upped the horsepower and put some better tyres on this thing and it managed to do the job. But overall it was a nice little more trickier event to actually get things started. So yeah, I didn't really mind this one too much. Anyway, we did manage to take first place in the end, so let's head over to the timing screen then. 2 minutes 31.699 for total completion time, so not too bad, and again typically short like any Sunday Cup event. Overall we got 20,000 credits and no clean race bonus for some reason, and I'm not quite sure why. So opinion time then, what did I think of this first event for GT7 1.63? Well, admittedly it's a Sunday Cup event and it's very much copy paste like the rest of them. There's not really too much different going on here. However, I do appreciate the fact it's on a track layout that never really gets a look in GT7, and of course I believe so far we've never actually seen it used in reverse. The other thing I do appreciate is that it was a lot more difficult than the typical Sunday Cup events. Yes, it's probably artificial and it's probably just a lead car being way up the road from you, but I do feel with the short layout and of course the quick time you have to work your way through the field, it does make it a bit more on edge than we typically see with every other Sunday Cup. That trend is definitely going to continue with event number 2 of the update, Suzuka Circuit and the Japanese FR Challenge 450. Of course, as for the finer details, it's a very short and sweet affair once again. 2-lap sprint, a total of 8 cars. Car type is a road car, of course the country is Japan, and the drivetrain is FR. First place will award you 40,000 credits, second 24,000, and third 16,000. Now of course, as for the main rival cars, it's a bunch of Japanese FR layout cars, typically some of this slower in game. However, we will discuss that a little bit during this event because there is a brand new cheating AI on show here. BOP is off, you must use a garage car, and car settings are allowed. There's no mechanical damage, and both the penalty settings are set to completely off, so once again, you don't have to worry about them. Now let's get into it then, because I have a lot to discuss on this very short and sweet event. Now first of all, there is the chance of having variable weather here, which I definitely appreciate, and the event itself is aimed around the new Mazda Spirit Roadster, and that is absolutely fine. I genuinely feel that single Mazda would be the perfect car for this type of event if it wasn't for one single car that this event can bring in, and that is going to be, of course, if you played this event, the Sylvia K's S14. That gold one with the huge rear wing is absolutely rocket ship fast. I don't get how that thing actually qualifies for this event, considering the sheer speed it has in comparison to anything else on the grid. I would actually say it's either on par or even worse than the Alfa Romeo that we see in the European Clubman Cup 600. It is the biggest cheating AI I've seen in a very long time. Yes, it does make for an incredibly edgy race and overall does make it more enjoyable, but as you just saw there, that thing flies. The only hope something like this Mazda has on the hardest difficulty to catch it is through the corners, where the AI is typically inconsistent, but as soon as that thing gets on one of the many straighter parts of Suzuka here, it is absolutely gone. As you can see, I end up with a side-by-side battle here, and then he's quite quickly going to gain traction and disappear all the way off down the road. Again, it is ridiculous, but I do actually appreciate having a ridiculous challenge like this, but for everyday players, it might just prove to be a little bit too much. I do feel like I have a full video planned on just this single AI opponent, and I'm pretty sure I've seen it previously, but never to this ridiculous amount. That thing is honestly insane. As you can see here, for the majority of the event, as soon as I took the lead, I was just using a little Mazda as a massive rolling roadblock to hopefully hold up the S14, and thankfully we would, in the end, after 2 laps, taking victory, but only just. Definitely a very edgy overall event. So let's look at the timings then. 4 minutes 54 completion for this one, a fastest lap of 2:27. So what about the payout then? Not too bad, 60,000 credits with that clean race bonus and 7.2 miles travelled. So it's time to give you my opinion on this one. I genuinely did enjoy this, and I do feel like it's almost purpose built around the Mazda. But of course, that one single AI in the form of that S14 is an absolute monster compared to the rest of the field. Yes, there's easier ways around it by just going above the 450 limit, but if you want the challenge, then honestly this is one of the best challenges you can have in GT7 period. Again, just like going up against the Alfa Romeo in the European 600, it just adds that little bit of an edge to an event that could have been incredibly dull and dreary, so I actually appreciate that. And I have to admit, I am actually really looking forward to going back and properly studying that single AI. Anyway, let's move in to the third event then. So this is the return of Race of Turbo Sports Cars, this time taking place at one of my personal favourite tracks in GT7, Watkins Glen. This is of course a 5-lap sprint with a total of 16 cars on the grid. Nothing out the ordinary there. PP limit is 700 PP or less, and of course your car must be turbocharged. As for first place, it's 95,000 credits, second place is 57,000 credits, and third is 38,000. Your main rival cars are a bunch of turbocharged monsters, of course some very much close to 700, some not so much. BOP is off, you must use a garage car, and car settings are allowed. There's no damage, and of course both penalties are set to off. So let's go ahead and get into this one then. And once again, we're going to be using one of the brand new cars from the update, the Hyundai Elantra N. Now, I would have to admit here, I wasn't expecting too much from this car. However, it has massively exceeded my expectations. Yes, it looks absolutely cool. Yes, I was excited for it, but I didn't expect it to be just this good. We finally have a rival to the FL5 Type R Civic when it comes to front wheel drive road cars, so I'm all for it. However, in terms of the event, I do have to admit this is perhaps the most dull of the bunch. It really is nothing out of the ordinary whatsoever. There's rather large gaps from car to car, so you're going to find yourself kind of overtaking one guy, then going on to maybe a group of 2 or 3 cars, then going on to one car, so on and so forth. Unfortunately, a lot of the Race of Turbo Sports Cars events are like this, and considering the grid is extremely mixed with some cars way below 700 pp and some way up there, unfortunately it just feels like a massive mixed bag. Now again, I don't think this is just because I spend a lot of time at Watkins Glen because I massively enjoy it. I think that the AI here is just incredibly made up of a huge mixed bag of cars, and unfortunately just end up being incredibly inconsistent because of it. They're always just tripping over each other, getting held up, and that just makes them easy pickings, which is typically when you'll come across a group of cars. Right here at the beginning of lap 3, I've already moved into a podium position before very quickly going around the outside of the FL5 and starting to battle for the lead. So as you can see here, we're basically going to take the lead incredibly early and then spend the rest of the event just driving around on our own, and unfortunately it really does suck the fun out of this one. So our last bit of battling would be at the midpoint of lap 3, at which point we'd then disappear off into the distance and never see anyone else ever again. So once I'd gone ahead and actually taken the lead, all I had to do at that point was just drive around, keep it nice and clean, and in the end I did manage to pull out a gap of way over 10 seconds. So unfortunately this one for me personally is just far too easy almost no matter what, and really the whole leaderboard shows that. So yes, whilst there's a 700 pp limit, as you can see, some of these cars are going to be nowhere even close to that. However, one thing that I cannot complain about for this event is the payout. 142,500 credits really isn't too bad whatsoever. So let's move into my opinion for this one. Well, I'm going to keep it very short and sweet. Unfortunately, the AI is just too much of a mixed bag. They don't provide enough challenge, and unfortunately at this great track it makes the event pretty run of the mill, and unfortunately just far too boring in the end. I feel like these kind of events need some proper balancing to them, and hopefully Polyphony go back to the drawing board and just kind of rejiggle it so it becomes a little bit more of a challenge to the player. Now the fourth event of the update is the return of the Vision Gran Turismo Trophy. This time around it's at the Nürburgring GP, of course celebrating the return of Opel to Gran Turismo. So it's a 5-lap sprint with a total of 16 cars. Of course you must use a VGT, which is 850 pp or less. First is 100k, second is 60, and third is 40. Your main rival cars, well again, it's a bunch of Vision Gran Turismo cars. That one's very obvious. However, just be aware of the likes of the Porsche VGT. Car restrictions BOP is off, and you must use a garage car, and car settings are allowed. There's no damage, and both penalties once again are set to off. Now in terms of this event, of course I'm going to use the brand new Opel Corsa, and I'm actually going to admit this right now, this might just be the single best electric car in Gran Turismo 7. That's not saying much, but in terms of the way this thing actually feels when driving it, it felt decent. If you've watched this channel for a while, you will probably know that I absolutely despise electric vehicles. However, I have to admit, it feels that good that I honestly feel if you gave this to a player that typically uses automatic transmission in GT7, they wouldn't even be able to tell that it falls into the same category as an electric vehicle. Of course, apart from the sound and such, but in terms of the driving performance, this is how every single electric vehicle in GT7 should feel. Not too heavy, not too bulky, actually can slow itself down and can actually put all of that power down without spinning up the wheels and then throwing itself into the wall. It was genuinely enjoyable, and I do feel dirty for saying that, so I'm going to go ahead and take a shower now. As for the event itself though, it really is just run of the mill. There's not much different here. We're at the Nürburgring GP, it's not the longest layout in the world, and again this isn't the longest event in the world either. Really there's nothing too tricky on show, and in fact I did notice from the typical AI that kind of leads these events, they weren't present. Typically for me when it comes to these events, I'm just chasing down a Porsche, a Genesis or a Peugeot, and thankfully they started towards the back, so I just didn't have to deal with that for once, which made it a nice refreshing change. If we look at the leaderboards, well, it tells the same story as well. The likes of the Genesis and Porsche only really made it up to the middle of the pack. So again, a nice change of pace for this one, and not too over the top like we typically see with them. The payout isn't too bad either. In just under 10 minutes, you're looking at 150,000 credits. However, I don't necessarily know if I'll go back to this one. So what's my overall opinion then? Well, it's very run-of-the-mill. Yes, it's a nicer change of pace where we've not got an absolutely insanely fast Porsche just way off in the distance, or a Genesis or something, and I feel like the pack racing here is just much better. Overall, the Nürburgring GP is a fine track to race on, and of course, if you choose to use the new Opel, you'll probably know exactly what I mean. It might actually exceed your expectations, which for me were absolutely on the floor. And with that, we move into the surprise event of the update, the return finally of the World Touring Car 700, this time over at France and Alsace. As for the finer details, it's a 10-lap race featuring a total of 20 cars. Tyres and fuel are on it 10 times and 8 times, which is actually quite high here. Of course, you can use all the racing compounds of tyres for this one with a 700 pp limit in place. First place, it's not too bad, 250,000 credits, second 150k, and third 100k. Now of course your main rival cars here are the Group 4 category of cars. BOP is off, you must use a garage car and car settings are allowed. There's no mechanical damage and both shortcut and wall collision are set to off. So let's get into the event then. We've got a total of 20 cars on the grid and a longer event at Alsace. It's great to finally see a longer event here and I do appreciate that. Now you've probably noticed here that once again I'm using the Elantra N, and that's because I just wanted to test out a 700 pp touring car build and I feel like it worked absolutely perfectly. Now it is a little bit heavy on the tyre wear because it is so incredibly high here, and it's the same with the fuel usage. Unfortunately, I feel like Polyphony's just really turned it up a notch for this one, meaning that road cars are honestly a little bit less viable. I think most people will probably just go for a Group 4 or maybe a detuned Group 3 car here, but if you do want to try something out, I do recommend trying to build up the Elantra. Yes, it's front wheel drive, but you can very much get it in line with the likes of the Mazda and the Suzuki Swift. I'll say this now, if the Elantra N gets a TCR variant in GT7 and ends up as the main Group 4 car, I definitely wouldn't be complaining about that. In fact, it was surprisingly good in terms of its performance. Of course, the main run that we're doing here is Fuel Mix 6 and of course work our way through the field. Now we're going to actually have to do it on a 2-stop run here, so I decided to make my first pit stop at the end of lap 4. Now of course, tyre wear is rather quite turned up here, so I went for a new set of racing hards, and of course I will be filling the car to full. That is when the mid strategy comes into a bit of a different overall feel. Now overall I did know I had the pace over the Suzuki Swift, which was typically leading this event, so the main thing I was going to do is do a Fuel Mix 6 and then of course overtake the leader, then go ahead and turn the engine up, doing a very quick in lap, boxing once more, a new set of tyres, more fuel, and then go to the end hopefully in the lead or close enough. Now as for the AI strategy here, the majority of them will only pit the once, typically between lap 5 and lap 6. However, there are some that do seem to take a second pit stop, but most of the time they'll be way back down the order. Most of the lead cars, say the Suzuki, Mazdas and all that good stuff, as well as the Dodge Viper, will typically do it on a one-stop strategy. So just be aware of that when you're going ahead and entering this event. You will definitely need the 1-lap pace over them to be able to make those kind of extra pit stops work for you. So lap 7, we're in the lead and it's time to build up the gap on the in lap. End of lap 7, we're boxing in for the final time, a new set of racing hards, and of course we're going to fill the car to just about full so we can just burn off that extra fuel on that final lap, just in case we need that little extra power if we don't end up in the lead by that point. Of course, we know that at this point in time the Suzuki doesn't have to pit, so we are going to have to chase it down once again. So of course it was time to exit the pits and get the job done. It was just very unfortunate that the Supra came absolutely out of nowhere, meaning that we already ended up behind this car, having to already make a move before even chasing down Suzuki. Very frustrating, but eventually we would. On the 9th lap, we're going to throw it down the inside and get first place. And at that point, it's time to just build up the lead, keep it nice and clean, and of course, cross the finish line, which we would do with a pretty decent lead of just over 10 seconds. The Suzuki really dropping off there at the end. So, first place and a very enjoyable event. A total time of 21 minutes, 8 seconds, 0.764, and a fastest lap on the final lap of 2 minutes dead. Unfortunately as well, we didn't manage to take the clean race bonus, so the payout in the end stayed at the default 250,000 credits after 33.7 miles travelled. And well, with that, we complete all of the events from 1.63. Overall, I feel like this was a very surprising and enjoyable event. Is it the longest event in the game? No. Is it the best paying event in the game? No. But in terms of using a track that never really gets a look in for longer events, and of course actually feels incredibly good with both road cars and race cars, this one's honestly fantastic. And with that comes to an end my update 1.63 event guide. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, every single one of you, and a huge thank you to all of my channel members listed on screen now. Your continued support absolutely means the world to me, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care guys, peace.